says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast, a rather belated reaction to the round 10 results. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. We do apologise for the delays. We'll get to the explanation shortly. Joining me to break down the round 10 action, Parramatta's loss, or narrow loss to the Gold Coast Titans, my good mate, Sixties. It's a couple of days after, mate, but we got there after stumbling and bumbling through a lot of forgotten cable and some technical issues. But here we are ready to give our thoughts on Parramatta's loss in round 10.
Do we relabel this the delayed reaction?
This might be the delayed reaction podcast, yes.
Well, let me just reassure any listeners that my takes on things basically haven't changed in the last 2 days.
Yeah.
I'm still scratching my head. I was scratching my head after the game. I'm still scratching my head now. So it's not going to change too much my response to things. So yes, but we're finally getting into it, and it's going to mean that we're going to squeeze in a lot of content between now and Saturday night. And can I just give first of all a thank you to the people who were there for the first part of this podcast, which was our live preview in Jack's Bar and Grill at Parramatta Leagues Club. We had some people that braved the really cold conditions, the late Sunday night. It was so for those people that joined us in Jack's Bar and Grill, thank you for joining us. And we're back there again on Saturday night for the game against the Raiders. So we'll see you there then.
And as always, a quick shout out to the Tip Sheet sponsors, Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and star partners Narellan, Auburn and Parramatta, making this show happen week in and week out. So 60s, we'll get into it. First part of the podcast, like you mentioned, will be the pre-game from Jack's Bar and Grill. So we'll cut to that now and then join you guys for the post-game after.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Got the microphone working. I'm John, also known as 4020. Joining me is my good mate, 60s, also known as Craig. We're from the Tip Sheet, also known as the Cumberland Throw. Here to do a pre-game chat for round 10, Magic Round. Parramatta Eels taking on the Gold Coast Titans. Craig, I'll let you take it away, mate. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming out tonight on a really cold night. It's a jam-packed Jack's Bar and Grill tonight. And look, we are going to take you through some of the key stats and what we're expecting from tonight's game. So, John, just to start off, just some overall records. The Eels have played the Titans 23 times in their history. That's the current incarnation of the Gold Coast, winning 12 and losing 11. At the venue, both teams have played 32 matches, mostly against the Broncos. The Eels have won 12 matches. The Titans have only won 10. Now, head-to-head, the Eels have won their last 7 matches dating back to 2017. And last year's results were 32-28 and 26-20 in favour of the Eels. And in that time period, back to 2017, the lowest scoring match had 34 points, and that was in 2021. Of the last 5 matches played against the Titans, 4 have been played in Queensland, so this match tonight is going to make it 5 out of the last 6 games played in Queensland. Now, just on the venue, John, what's your takes on what you've observed on the field so far in terms of how the ground's holding up?
There we go. It was a big talking point for us in our pre-game or preview podcast. Being slated in that 8th game in Magic Round is always a concern. You know, you go through 7 games before you get to your game. And Suncorp was already a turf that was struggling prior to round 10. And just by our luck, a little bit of hail before the 7th game today has added to the chop on that Suncorp turf. So as we watch the Cowboys put away the Roosters pretty comfortably here, that field's looking more and more like a sort of a mud field more than anything else.
Yeah, that was probably my concern, was that it was going to chop up like a cow paddock, but the last thing we wanted was any sort of bog surface that was there. Let's hope there's no more rain, because rain is the great leveller. Now, just going through how this match looks. The teams, the Titans are on 10 points. They're 2 points ahead of the Eels, courtesy of the bye. Now, from the point of view of attack, I've highlighted a few stats. All up, the Eels have scored 222 points from 9 games. That's an average of 24.67 points per game. The Titans, 188 points from 8 games, 23.5 points per game. That's not really a huge difference there. Then when it comes down to some of the individual stats across the team, offloads, the Eels sit second across the NRL with 12.9 offloads per game. The Titans 7th with 9.3 per game. Line breaks, the Eels are 4th with 4.8. The Titans are pretty close. Even though they're 8th, they're averaging 4.6 line breaks across the game. That's across the NRL per game. That's probably an indication more so of maybe there's not a huge difference across all teams when it comes to that. It's just like a matter of decimal point difference.
We've spoken about parity in the competition this year, and offensively at least, that seems to be the case with teams that have been outside the 8 traditionally in the last couple of seasons, sort of finding that levelling aspect with their attack against the better teams in this competition.
Yeah, now there is I'm going to come up to a concerning stat, but it's strange in another way. First of all, the Eels sit 5th in run metres at 1,597 run metres per game. The Titans 9th at 1,511. This is a stat that surprised me. Tackle breaks. The Eels sit 16th, that's second last, for tackle breaks at 25.6 per game. The Titans 9th at 29.1. Now, given the Parramatta's doing quite well in attack, but it surprised me that our tackle breaks are sitting that low.
So it would suggest that we're creating clean line breaks more than breaking through the front line with physicality. So I don't know if that's a indication of a different attacking structure under Trent Barrett, or the Eels probably just not in 5th gear yet when it comes to their offensive structures. But it's interesting to see, isn't it, that we're sort of creating opportunities without being touched more than so, using pure physicality to break that front line.
Maybe this stat fits in with it. When it comes to completions, the Eels are 12th with 29.3 completed sets per game. Titans are even worse. They're sitting 16th at 27.6. So I guess there might be a little bit of a reasoning found in the smaller number of line breaks as well, in the lower number of completions.
Well, if you're not getting through your sets, you're denying yourself attacking opportunities, aren't you? And that number plays true to what we've sort of seen on the eye test with the Parramatta Eels, where they've had a couple of games of outstanding completion rates. The win over Penrith immediately jumps to mind, where I think we had 2 uncompleted sets across the totality of that game. But otherwise, our completion rate's probably been below that 80% metric that they sort of set themselves as a par mark.
And this is another stat which I think is reflected in those completions, because if you don't complete your sets, you don't get to the kick. The Eels sit 7th for kick metres. And you think with a kicker like Mitch Moses that we might be sitting higher than that, but we've only have an average of 692 kick metres per game.
And that's 7th with Mitch setting an NRL era 1K plus kicking metres against Penrith.
That's right. So when you take that big outlier game of over a kilometre, it makes it interesting that we sit 7th. The Titans, in comparison, are sitting 13th with 634. Just turning to defence, the Eels have conceded 188 points across their 8 games. That's at an average of 20.88. And overall, that's ended up with giving us a differential of plus 34 on the for and against. The Titans have conceded 199 points in less games. So consequently, they've got a higher average points conceded at nearly 25 points per game, and they are in a negative differential, negative 11. Missed tackles, the Eels sit 13th at 33.3. That's not too good.
No.
The Titans are only just ahead at 33.1. So very similar there. Ineffective tackles, again, it doesn't read well. The Eels 13th at 14.6 ineffective tackles per game. The Titans 15th with 15.9 ineffective tackles per game. Now, we were talking before about the line breaks and the missed tackles. This is interesting because this line breaks conceded. This is where I think it might be a measure of the Eels' scramble defence. Line breaks conceded, the Eels sit 5th, conceding only 3.8 line breaks per game. I mean, that's considering the missed tackles and ineffective tackles. That's really indicative that the Eels system with the scramble and the slide must be working quite well.
I think if you combine that statistic with one of the other ones that we always talk about, and that's the ruck speed, how the Eels are consistently anywhere from 0.3 to 0.5 of a second slower than their opposition, those two things are indicative of a bend but not breaking defensive structure where you're happy to concede meters and tackle breaks, but you're minimising line breaks and hopefully minimising points scored against you.
Yeah, and in comparison, the Titans sit 11th at 5.0 line breaks conceded per game. The other one, which maybe it's been buoyed a little bit by a couple of recent games where we've had some problems with taking the high kicks, although it's not really a concern, but we are sitting 13th for dropped bombs, 0.9 per game, so roughly a one drop bomb per game. The Titans sit 10th with 0.6 or, a dropped bomb basically every second game. So they're doing quite well with that. Discipline now. The Eels sit 11th for errors, 15.7 errors per game. And the Titans 9th at 10.8. So we're making 5 more errors per game than the Titans. Obviously an area where we need to get a little bit tighter.
And that comes back to those incompleted sets that we're talking about. When you're making mistakes, you're not getting to your kick. And all those things just tied together, aren't they? They're all woven in. When you let one sort of thing go down, something else gets pulled with it.
And just on those incomplete sets, then the Eels sit 11th with 9 incomplete sets per game. The Titans 4th with 8 incomplete sets per game. An area where we are good, however, and it might surprise some people, is in penalties conceded.
No, that's not surprising for me because last year or two we've been the most disciplined team when it comes to conceding those penalties. Once again, sometimes it seems detrimental on the eye test because we're giving away fast ruck speed because of it, coming back to that bend but not breaking principle in defence. But the reason why the Eels have such a difference in aggregate of ruck speed and among other things is that their discipline is excellent. They're going to peel off faster and not give away those ruck penalties.
Yeah, so we're sitting with second, as I said, with only 4.6 penalties conceded per game. The Titans 11th with 6.3 penalties conceded per game.
And yet so many teams seem to become so well disciplined when they take on the Parramatta Eels.
Now, just looking to individual threats. Who would be your guess for the main tackle breaks for the Titans, mate?
It's hard to go past. I know he's mercurial and can be very inconsistent, but it's hard to go past Big David Fafita down that left edge.
Yeah, Fafita sits top of the tree for them. He makes 4.3 tackle breaks per game. He's second to Philip Sami, who makes 4.4 tackle breaks per game. Well,
he's in some red-hot form. He wasn't their first-choice winger coming into this season, but he's grabbed his opportunity. And he's another player that can run a bit hot and cold, but when he's on, and he's on right now, he's devastating.
And it's no surprise as well to see Campbell coming in with 2.9 tackle breaks per game.
Super elusive.
The Eels, it starts with a surprise. Our most effective tackle breaker is Junior Paulo with 3.4 per game, followed by Sean Lane 2.8 and Gutherson 2.7.
I suppose maybe Sean Lane's the most surprising one there because Junior's interesting because we've spoken about how big he is but how light in his feet he is. So he's going to create some of those opportunities with his foot speed before the defensive line. Gutherson too makes sense because he just is so tireless that later in games when people start to fatigue, he's going to start bouncing in and out of tackles. But Sean Lane down that left edge, the big man, he's always good for post-contact meters, but he's breaking some tackles, which is good to see.
Yeah, but here's another concern for the Eels. The run meters of the back 5.
Yeah. Spoken about that, haven't we, mate?
Yeah, so top of the list for the Eels is actually Will Penasini at 137.4 run meters per game, followed by Gutherson at 132, Sevo 124, Dunster 93.3 and Simonson 93. So we've got 2 of our outside backs that are coming in at under 100 metres. It's probably not an ideal result.
No, you compare him to some of the premier back three combinations, and I know that's excluding Will Penasini now because he's in the centres, And I know Penrith are the benchmark in that regard, but a lot of teams in this current iteration, this current metagame of the NRL are getting, 150, 170, 200 metres individually out of their back three. Those two wingers in particular have become such a vital part of the initial go forward and laying up, later parts of the set for their middle forwards.
In contrast, it's only Campbell from the Titans that has less run meters, and he has come off the bench as well. So he only sits at 87.6, but every one of their outside backs, their back five, comes in well over 100 metres. Now we're going to cross and take the sound in just a moment from our the live broadcast. We're getting dressing room scenes just now. Just a couple of other things. Dylan Brown leads the try assist for the Eels with 9. Another surprise, Penasini's in there with 5.
Yeah, he's just been creating so many opportunities down that right edge, 60s, both for himself and for his other edgemen out there, being the back rower and the winger and the halfback.
Yeah, best for the Titans is Fafita on 4, so huge difference there. Line breaks, Sivo leads it with 10, followed by Moses 6, Gutherson 5, Penasini 5. Khan Pereira tops it for the Titans with 10. So he's having a very good season. Line break assists, Penasini again features. He leads the Eels for line break assists with 7. Gutherson 5, Dylan Brown 6, he's up there again, Moses 4. The Titans, not big numbers, 4 and 4, Fafita 4, Kelly 3. And just to round off, before we take the sound from the broadcast, offloads. Here's a surprise. Junior Paulo and Maddo, they're only averaging 1.1 and 1.2 offloads per game.
Again, that plays true to what we've seen with our eyes, where I think some of the Parramatta's more prolific offloaders have been playing a little bit within themselves this year under new structures. And
the Titans in comparison, but who does feature for the Eels is Hopgood with 2.4, Lane 2.3, Cardi 1.9, and for the Titans, surprisingly, it's Kelly with 2.2, then Fafita 1.8. Mate, we're going to round things off just now. What's your takes on tonight's game? What's going to...
We spoke about the surface being one of the big equalising factors. Usually Parramatta's forward pack has been one of its big strengths this year, in years past. We saw against Newcastle they looked really good, so hopefully they can build on that. And if that forward pack gets traction in a very tractionless pitch, they're going to go a long way towards getting the victory. But given what we just saw in that Gold Coast, Cowboys Roosters game, got there eventually, there is going to be opportunities to move the ball still. The Cowboys showed ability to play a little bit laterally and expose the Roosters in those slippery conditions. So you're going to have to balance it out, playing really strong in the middle, but also taking opportunities out wide.
Historically, it's been a high-scoring game between the Eels and the Titans. The weather's got me adjusting what I thought earlier in the week when I thought it was going to be a completely dry track. I'm going to change my predicted tip to Eels winning 26-16. That's still relatively high-scoring, but perhaps not as high-scoring as I thought before. I'm going to change my first try scorer as well. I'm going to go, in this instance, for Hopgood. I think he's going to create some havoc around the ruck, and best on field. I'm going to go with a double there, Hopgood again.
I think I had Jermaine for my best on field in our original batch predictions, so I'll stick with the big man there, although I think Will Penasini, who was my first try scoring tip, will be right up there as well. And I'm going to back the Eels for a big win still. I think I went 35-10 initially. I'll stick in that sort of ballpark.
You're still going for that disrespectful field
even
goal.
on the chopped up turf, he's going to pull a Sean Timmins, Mitchy Moses, and just shank it over. Hit one of the uglier ones you'll see. Team news before we sign off: 60s, Eels 1-17. Titans have the one change on the interchange with the ESL dummy half Cruz Leeming dropping off, bringing in rookie Keanu Keeney, who is a little pocket rocket apparently. I think he's 176, 82 kilos, so not a big lad, but very exciting apparently.
And what about everyone else here? We ready for an Eels win? Yeah. Okay, bring it on, and we'll switch over now for everyone here to the live broadcast.
And we're back. 60s, as you mentioned earlier in the show. Massive shout out to the people who made it out the Jack's Bar and Grill, braving those very, very breezy and sharp conditions on Sunday. And then we hope to have more people back this Saturday as we take on the Canberra Raiders in Canberra. But let's talk about this game, mate. Parramatta Eels 24 going down to the Gold Coast Titans 26. 5 tries apiece. Mike Acevo bagging a double for the Eels. So a triple. Hat-trick there with Guffo and Davey also scoring. Unfortunately, Mitchell Moses not being the difference, or being the difference negatively off the kicking tee. He only went 1 from his 4 attempts, with Guffo adding on 1 from 1 for the Andrew Davey try. On the other side, Kieran Foran bagged a double. Alefiana Pereira also bagging a double. Brian Kelly scoring the match winner, or ostensibly the match winner in the 71st minute. Tanner Boyd not sharp off the tee either, but he kicked 3 from 5, and that was enough to get the Titans over the line. Crucially, Clinton Gutherson binned in the 7th minute. I don't think it was that controversial, 60s. It was just one of those unfortunate football incidents where your natural instincts dictate that you try and get around the guy in that fraction of a second, and he interfered with him in what the referee deemed to be a try-scoring situation. Quickly through the team.
It's interesting on that too, because the judgment is made on outcome rather than intent, because we did see an incident later in that same half, I think it was, where, if I'm correct, it was Jaden Campbell who looked to interfere with Mike Acevo.
Yeah.
Except Sevo had the power to push through Campbell's attempt at slowing him up. Now, given how close Sevo went to regathering that ball, and because that was the one where he was looking to ground the ball before it went over the end goal, and he just didn't quite get the grounding. It was just a bit too far ahead of him. He was himself, most of his body, I think, was over the touching the dead ball line, and as it turned out, he bounced the grounding. You have to wonder if there was a microsecond or half a second that he was delayed in getting through. Was there grounds?
Given what we saw in Darwin, it would be the first time the Eels have had negative results from the sinbinning or non-sinbinning of an opposition player. But we have to, trundle on. But looking at the stats here, mate, it paints a very one-sided picture, really, which is, it's fascinating that the game went the way it did, but it shows you the power of having a player, especially the defensive coordinator, essentially, in Guffo in the sin bin, as well as that intercept try that Gutherson threw to Cam Pereira, because in terms of the attacking stats, geez, the Eels are all over the Titans.
Can I just say, first of all, there's a couple of things that are like a deja vu, and I'll use the tautology all over again, that in our match against the Sharks, when Gutho was sin-binned.
He was HIA in that game. It was a rubbish HIA. It was like no head contact, and he went off for 15 minutes. So it's even worse than a sin-bin in some ways. But the defense just fell apart, and it happened again.
Yes, and again, here's the other deja vu. Again, the deja vu. Sorry about all that tautology, but it was. We're talking about how many times this year where we say blank tries a piece.
Yeah, and the goal,
fill in the number there.
And that's right. The goal kicking mean the difference, and you look at Mitch's actual season to date goal kicking. I think it was 3 percentage points down on his career. So he's a 77% career kicker. He's 74 this year. So he's not having a terrible year in terms of goal kicking, but what he is doing is being incredibly streaky. So when he's good, he's drilling them, but when he's bad, he's missing them real bad. And the problem is he's missing them real bad in these close games when we need him to be hitting, 77% of them.
Yeah, and that was the problem. I guess you're damned on occasions when you're the goal kicker, but by the same token, the skill of goal kicking probably adds dollars to your contract value.
Oh,
anyway.
absolutely.
So so if you're that person,
if you're going to reap the rewards on one side, you got to take the pressure and the criticism on the other. And this is an attack.
There were 3 very similar kicks against the Titans from where it was like the adjustment just wasn't quite made, and I guess that's the thing that we notice with Mitch, is that his first kick generally dictates what's going to happen.
Is his radar on or not? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, and when all 3 of those left edge conversions, because of the Mike Acevo hat trick, went to the exact same spot and he couldn't make the adjustment, you just it was just going to be one of those nights, unfortunately. In terms of completions, both teams having a good night. 85% for the Eels, 89% for the Titans. Eels ahead on possession, 53 to 47%, which was 51 to 49 at half time. So the Eels actually had even better second half splits for possession. And I mean, it makes sense given they did come back on the scoreboard. But they were up on runs, 208 to 169. They were plus 400 just about on run meters, plus 170 on post-contact meters, 7 line breaks to 5. One thing they weren't up on was tackle breaks, 22 to 41 for the Gold Coast. Gold Coast obviously having a lot of impact down Parramatta's right edge in terms of busting those tackles. But the Eels' average set distance was nearly 59 metres. They were running rampant through the middle, and I suppose the efforts of Ryan Madison and Bryce Cartwright really helping in that regard. 60s. Play the ball speed, both teams quite slow in this game. 3.7 flat for the Gold Coast, 3.79 for Parramatta. Eels are doubling up on the offloads, 18 to 9. Kick defuse for both teams was fairly ordinary, 55% for the Gold Coast, 50% for Parramatta. Then the tackle rates, Eels down below 85% again on the season, 84.59 versus the Gold Coast. Also fairly modest, 86.79 effective tackle rate. So neither team with great defense in this game. That plays true to what we saw on the eye test. 41 missed tackles for Parramatta, the Gold Coast 22. But the Gold Coast making, essentially they flipped the positions on ineffective tackles, 14 for Parramatta but 29 for the Gold Coast. Negative plays, 6 errors apiece. Parramatta conceding 7 penalties to the Gold Coast 3. We can talk about that. And obviously the Clinton Gutherson sin bin. So that's the team stats, 60s. In terms of the individual player stats, well, there was a couple of standout performances. If I can just pull them up here. Over to
No, I think there's 3 players that we can point the finger at in terms of outstanding performances.
And even though I've got a bone to pick with him in terms of his negative try involvements, because I think it's very rare to put one try against Clinton Gutherson. I think you can actually bill him with 4 in this game. 2 for the sin bin, 1 for the intercept, and then 1 on that last one where he made the poor wrap up at the end, allowing the Gold Coast to center the ball. But Guffo still got the 200 metres despite being in the sin bin. So he got a lot of work there. But the players that you really want to highlight here, well, Dillbags, he had a huge game. Yeah. We've been waiting for that one all season, and he finally put it together with and without Mitchell Moses, which was good to see. And then on top of that, I thought Ryan Madison off the bench was superhuman. He was massive. And you might need the stupid new Dally M system 60s to give a couple of dual 3-point games out for this one because they were both outstanding.
Except they'll give it to the Gold Coast.
I actually think Dylan Brown walked away from this game with 4 or 5 Dally M points. So,
okay.
Yeah. And then after that, the numbers for Bryce Cartwright, well, they're not as flashy or gaudy as the other two. 14 runs, 128 metres versus Maddo's 251 metres and Dill's 238 metres. But his involvements were top-notch. And the only real blemish on his entire game was that missed tackle on Brian Kelly at the end, which was also a function of Guffo not bringing the ball down out wider to stop that, slow down that spread. So, yeah, those 3 players were outstanding. I thought Wiremu had a solid game, even the numbers aren't amazing. 8 for 83 were his run meters, which actually I'm surprised is that low. It felt like he had a decent game.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised with that, but his minutes were quite low. He was only down for 28 minutes.
I think Maddo essentially played the main prop in this game, more than Junior, more than anyone. He had 52 minutes.
But that 251 run meters in only 52 minutes.
From 23 carries, by the way. See what they weren't cheap runs. He was averaging over 10 meters a run on huge production. 4 tackle breaks. I think there might have been a couple offloads. Yeah, a couple offloads in there. He had a couple of nice passes before the line too. So
32 tackles.
Yeah, 32 tackles. 2 missed, 1 ineffective. So operating when the team was down below 85% effective tackle rate, he's up at 91.5%. So he was waving that banner pretty strongly in this game, and he was one of those players that didn't deserve the loss.
No, absolutely true. Just to carry on a little bit with the stats in the pregame, I was speaking about some of the key stats, and the Eels missed tackle count just it was came home to roost, didn't it? Like I spoke about how the Eels sit 13th in missed tackles with 33.3 missed tackles per game, and we went past that, didn't we? With this particular match.
Yeah, well, I think we're at 41 for this game, and there's no individual culprit this week. Indeed, in terms of the highest missed tackle count, which is 4, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players with 4 missed tackles. That includes Mike Acevo, we got Hodgson, Barlaw, Cartwright, and Hands. So, and obviously there's different degrees of workloads in those missed tackles. So Mike has made 2 tackles and missed 4. But on the flip side, you got someone like Josh Hodgson who's made 27, missed 4. So still not great, but obviously the effective tackle rate's way better. And we've been talking about the physicality, haven't we, 60s? And how barring the Penrith game and maybe the Canterbury game where it felt like they were turning a corner, the physicality's just not been there. And it's something I do want to talk about because we're 10 weeks in now. And I say this and I want to add the caveat that I realise that this season is more than ever because this season is actually crazy in terms of like how long it goes. We started earlier than we ever have, and we run 27 rounds this year, 60s. This season's never been this big. It's crazy. It's more of a marathon than ever. So we're 10 rounds in, and you don't want to be sprinting when you got another 17 weeks of competition. But the Eels are at a point now where I think there's legitimate concerns about how deep this team can go as it is right now. I know you look at Penrith, and the thing with Penrith was when they lost that grand final to the Melbourne Storm, going back 3 years now, they just doubled down. They just, it lit a fire and they came back hungrier and hungrier. Yeah, and we saw them dominate for the next 2 years. And unfortunately for the Parramatta Eels, that loss to Penrith in the grand final last year, it looks like it hasn't produced the same result. And maybe it's about pacing themselves, but if we look at our record now, 60s, we've had, 3 4-point losses in the first 3 rounds. Then we had an 8-point loss to the Roosters, an 8-point loss to the Broncos, and a 2-point loss to the Titans. We're on the wrong side of pretty much every coin toss game we've played this season except for the one against Penrith. Yeah. And those ones... You say?
Yeah, I was just going to say what we're seeing is that this year we're finding a way to lose some games, and we're dropping points that we can't afford to drop. That's right. So,
whereas for the last 4 years we've been finding ways to win these games, and yes, we had the bad losses to Souths and whatnot here and there, but we'd find a way to win all these tight games. And this year it's not coming together and while there is some consistency to some of the reasons, like we talked about that. Physicality and impact and defense and line speed, that's definitely been a key thing. Across those other losses, it's sort of been like one thread or a different thread here or there, and we haven't been able to consistently just, nail down.
Well, we've lost moments in the game. And look, and it's fair to say the goal kicking is a moment in itself, right? But we've lost or we've missed out on key moments where, and look, I'll go to this game against the Titans, and there's the cliche about rugby league being a game of inches. It was like we lost every moment of inches in that game. So when I think it was Sean Lane was brought down like millimetres from
they had to go upstairs, but he was clearly an inch short.
Yeah, when Sevo went within an inch of
the dead
ground
ball line,
that ball. And
David Fafita gets the ankle tap on Dylan Brown.
That little bit of interference that he had coming through, and it wasn't a significant amount of interference, but it was an interference by the same token. Whether the player could pull out of it or whether they deemed that he was committed to the tackle but then pulled out as soon as he realised he didn't have the ball, whatever the case may be, there was still an element of interference that's there, but it comes back to that game of inches there. It was like, and then of course there was the one where Sevo was, did come up short, and it's just like
David Fafita of all people got that ankle tap on Dylan Brown going through the middle.
Yeah.
It's just so, as we're commenting on the game live, just in our conversations, we're saying, geez, for a team that usually folds defensively, the Gold Coast are showing an unnatural amount of resilience this week.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
just finding
absolutely.
finding the cover tackle, the ankle tap, you know, the getting across in time, the cover defense.
Yeah, and there's all these moments that were happening in games where, you know, where last year there might have been a moment where they found that way to win it. They're not finding it this year. But look, by the same token, we were having some games last year during this early part where we were throwing out some shockers in there. Like, I mean, some real shocking performances. Our form hasn't fluctuated as much there. Like, we can talk about the games that you said where our physicality has been better, but you know, if you had have said by, you know, the natural averages that in those games where, you know, moments can go one way or they can go another, that if it had worked out at a 50-50 sort of split where, you know, a bit of good fortune or maybe something that happens in the flow of the game and it falls Parramatta's way rather than the opposition way, you know, even if you get half of those matches where they've had the same number of tries as the opposition, you're talking about being in a completely different position right now. But the fact is, we haven't found a way to win. And because we haven't found a way to win, we're sitting where we are, where we don't have a lot to play with in terms of affording too many losses from here on in.
Nope.
Like, they just have to find a way to win. And when you've got an away trip to Canberra, and Canberra's on a bit of a roll at the moment, and you know, I mean, it's arguable also that they've been fortunate to win some of the games, but they are on a roll. And then you've got a game against South coming up after that, and you think, like, it's more than feasible that the next two games are losses, and then we're talking about problem time, like massive problem time. And you're talking about having to string together 6 to 8 wins to get things back on track. And that's not going to be easy in this particular competition.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst I don't think that we're panic stations in terms of our form, we are not in a great spot in terms of results. So there's been a lot said about the Dragons and how they've been losing games on goals. But I could throw in, they're losing games to some bad teams, and they're losing them with stupidity, not goal. Like, they should be well and truly winning some of those games. Like for them, that the way they threw that match away against the Tigers was spectacularly thrown away. Like, it was embarrassingly thrown away. The Eels haven't had those moments. The Eels have been like consistently thereabouts because of their, I guess, our attackers functioning fairly well. But man, we've got to get some wins. We just got to get some wins, because at some point, I think the psychological factor of losing games is going to kick in. And, you know, you start to get where it's like, oh, this might just be a bit too hard, or this might be a bridge too far. Might start to kick in if they don't start to get the wins there. And now, just on the defence, it's, you know, in past years, you can look at it and go, oh, we're being done for numbers all the time, right? You know what it was like in the previous years, where like South and Manly would just expose our defence out wide, and it was embarrassing how easy teams were getting around us. It's like we had this week, where there was just enough players that were missing multiple tackles that there's opportunities that other teams are getting, and the thing is, they're icing enough of those opportunities that they're matching what our attackers producing.
Yeah, and it's creating that scoreboard pressure.
Yeah, because we're watching that game, and as I said, we're coming away from it and scratching the head. How'd we lose that? Because we just seem to be so dominant through the middle with it when we were carrying the ball. I mean, that try that Gutherson scored, that was on the back of like an incredible set of 6 from the kickoff. We just rolled up through the middle. We did nothing spectacular. We just rolled up through the middle, got to the kick, scored the try. Like, it was as basic as you can get, yet it was beautiful watching the execution of it all. And I thought at that moment, we've got them here. Well, and I was thinking to myself, we're going to see a scoreline. We're going to get them by 13 or more. We could be winning by about 18 points here. That was what I was thinking in my mind.
That last quarter, the Titans were wilting something fierce.
Yeah.
But the Eels just couldn't convert. They obviously ended up scoring with a lovely Dylan Brown break down the right when after Mitchell Moses knocked himself out, trying to tackle, I think it was a young hooker.
Yeah, it was.
Keeney. And again, I mean, this isn't obviously no one on the podcast is a complaint about this, but when they say, you know, if we stop tackling high and we just tackle low, you're going to get rid of all the concussions. It's like, hello? Like, you do realize that hips are like one of the most, you know, lethal in terms of concussion causing factors in the game. And again, it's just a reminder that you can't eliminate concussions by tackling low. But yeah, Dylan stepped up there. But yeah, we just couldn't convert. We had a couple of chances that we just couldn't quite link it together. And unfortunately, that culminated on the final play. And in a game where I thought Sean Lane had even though the numbers were good, there was a couple of drops that he shouldn't have had. And then he just had no game awareness on the last play. I don't know what was going on. He just he got tackled with the ball in hand. So
this is a with Laney, we're seeing a similarity to issues that he had before, where the timing's not quite right with his runs. It's not quite there, and that would in the past that used to cause him to drop a bit of ball in contact, where he just didn't quite have a grip on the ball that he should have, and he was either dropping the ball as he hit contact or in contact, and we were starting to see a similarity with that right at the moment. Now, here's the stark reality of, as I said, we were winning the middle, but the reality is that our most consistent forward, and here comes the caveat, when he's played, has been Ryan Madison. Now, he's missed 4 games this year, and you think to yourself, how significant has his omission at the start of the year been? Right? So there's the first thing. He's been, like, when he's been on the field, he's been massive for us. I would suggest that our next cab off the rank in terms of what he's delivered and in terms of consistency is Bryce Cartwright.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why am I not mentioning Junior?
Yeah, well, we did discuss Junior, I feel like, last week, talking about how he's had a lower impact this year. And, yeah, you would have hoped with Reg out, Junior would have had a bigger step up, especially because he had the 2-week holiday, right, after getting the high tackle against Penrith. But for whatever reason, Big Junes is well below his best this year.
Oh, he is well below his best. We spoke about how, like, the offloads are down this year. Now that can be a matter of, you know, not pulling the trigger because it's not the right time for an offload. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with, you know, the offloads have to happen when they can happen or should happen.
Especially when you've got Ryan Madison and Bryce Cartwright and Jermaine Hopgood. Like, there's always other outlets for offloading in the team, which could let Junior focus more on the physicality and dominating the ruck, you know, in the head-on collisions. But we're not seeing that. No,
and I think we're not jumping into, we're not putting the boot into Junior here. What we're saying is, I think we simply need more from him when we're missing the other key bookend. I mean, you know, Junior's an Origin player. We need, right at this time, we need the best from him, and I'm sure he'd be the first to acknowledge that he's not playing at his best football, and we're we're in a scenario where, like, Woody's been going really well, but we know that his mobility, like especially his lateral movement in defence, is going to be something that the Eels have to cover for, because he is such a big man and he's not a fast mover in that regard. That's just the physical restrictions that he has there, and and I don't know that that's ever going to change too much. He's more your bloke that you're going to bring off the bench for a bit of impact.
He's a bit of a old school bookend in that regard, isn't he? Like real north south. Was it Martin Lang Jr.? Was a bit like that too. Like, you just let him rip into the ruck, but knowing that they're going to be not sidestepping and defensively not exactly top tier in that regard. But they're still
we know he's going to bring. We know he will bring some impact tackles. In the middle, but a faster player is going to perhaps get the better of him if he's having to move too much. And we've seen where there's been occasions where he's been retreating in defence after making a tackle, and he's not yet back in the line. And a faster, and I think it was the Roosters that exploited that with getting a run out of dummy half. And let's face it, like even that game against the Roosters, it was a couple of key moments where they got us on, times like that, and you take that out of it, and I mean it's an even tighter contest than it was. But so we need our best players to really step up, and this is where it was a little bit tough with Gutho, because where we got from him what we always get from him, which is he's busting his ass in the game to win the game. But unfortunately, it was one of those games where he made errors in his play. And that can happen to any player, where they have a couple of things that go wrong in a game.
It does.
And unfortunately, his errors cost us, and it ended up being the difference. I mean, we can't point to him and say, you are the reason we lost. Or we can't point to Mitch Moses and go, you were the reason we lost. But by the same token, you can't ignore it. Like, if you're looking for reasons, if when they're doing the video analysis of the game and they're looking at how the stats fall, it's pure and simple. Mitch Moses missed his first 3 kicks at goal. Clint Gutherson got sent to the sin bin. He threw an intercept. He missed a key tackle, and that's just the.
And while there's probably half a dozen other reasons they could find on the video review of whether one lost the game, when you're talking about your best players needing to make the plays, then those two are definitely going to be in the spotlight. Yeah,
and the thing is that the coaches know that mistakes are going to happen in games. They want them minimised. But mistakes are going to happen, and what they want from the team is defend your errors.
Well, they completed 85% this game, 60s. It was just that the mistakes they made were as costly as they're going to be. So
that's it. I mean, you can't get any more costly.
Impact. Exactly.
You can't get any more costly than an intercept try.
No, length of the field.
When you're threatening to score yourself. And
exactly.
We spoke about it when it happened live, and we said that right there is, if you're playing what's in front of you, you don't throw the pass, you put the grubber in behind the line, because all of their defenders are up.
That's something I wanted to talk about, in that for Guffo and for the coaching staff, it's something they do need to address now, because that's the second time this season that Gutterson's been picked off going down that side of the cutout ball. Ronaldo Mulatalo did it earlier in the season, and that was a pivotal intercept in the context of that game too.
Absolutely, because you're talking about where did the difference come in that match?
Exactly.
Take that try out.
In a 4-point loss, you had another 12-point turnaround. And it's not to say that Guffo can't come down and throw that cutout pass to whoever's on the right wing, which would have been Hayes Dunster in this game. But we've been rotating through that spot. But it's just that if your winger is lurking anywhere near the line, you've got to be cognizant of it and either play the short ball or punish them with the grubber kick through. And
Well, when it happens multiple times, and when there's been other instances where teams have looked for it, it is obvious that he features on the tip sheet.
that's right. It's something that they've keyed into, saying that you can get that left to right pass of Gutherson if you're just willing to sort of lurk near the front line of defense. But that's the thing. There's an opportunity cost there defensively. If you're positioning yourself for the intercept, you're vulnerable to the kick. So the Eels just need to be able to play the football that's presented in front of them, the game scenarios, and if the winger's there in that spot lurking for the intercept, then either play short or go for the kick. And after you do that the first time, they're going to say, well, shit, I can't be lurking for the intercept, and they'll reset defensively. And if they don't, you just go back and punish them again. So, unfortunate for the Parramatta Eels there. Gold Coast Titans either they did their work or Pereira did a great job freelancing. That's the other option too. Some players just, take gambles. And maybe Pereira is one of them.
Once you start to see things repeat.
Yeah, once there's a coincidence, twice you start getting concerned that people are doing their homework.
Yeah. And I think it fits into it. This definitely fits into the homework category. I had a question that was put to me on Twitter the other day about, why aren't certain players being selected and what have you. And I said, look, the thing is that what we might see as spectators is not what coaches see as as deep analysts of the game and in every minute detail. And players miss out on selection for a whole range of things. It can be that they're fallen out of their systems, whether it be their attacking systems or the defence systems, whatever the structures that they're falling out of, and we don't know as spectators how therefore that this might be going on. We're just seeing something unfold, and it might be a line break, and we don't necessarily know who has been the one that might be responsible. We might be blaming one person,
but structurally the line break might have been 3 or 4 players inside where the crack first manifested.
Yep. So there's those sorts of things that happen. It can be that a player's technique at doing something isn't quite right. It can be that it could be any number of things that they're asking the players to work on. And you hear coaches say things like, "Oh, they've got a few things they need to work on," and it's said when players are dropped. It's said when there's players that aren't being selected. It can even be some. They're getting a comment in post match. They're asking about different players or what have you. Now, I said that I've been in a position where I've been able to try and dig a bit more information about different players and this and that over many years, right? And what I've simply learnt is I don't watch a game like a coach, and coaches watch games like coaches. And this is why I want to make the point, is that when there's something that's going wrong in any team, or when the team's being picked apart in some way, it's because coaches are seeing something in there that we might not be seeing. And we can be pointing the finger at a particular person or a particular player, and we might be wondering, well, why is this player being selected? It seems to me that they're the ones that are stuffing up, or why aren't we bringing this player in or that player in? The coaches are seeing things. They've got their KPIs for different players. They've got things that they've asked them to work on. And it may well be that they've got the same thing that's been asked of a player that's up for consideration to come into the team. We just don't know what that is. And if a player's not being selected, and we may disagree with it, we don't necessarily know that they might be failing in a way that is preventing them from being selected. And you know what? I think in this instance, like we were just talking about with Gutho, I reckon this is, I'm certain that the coaches have done their homework, the opposition coaches. And that, I mean, this to me it's like it's probably this is in the simpler category of this is an obvious thing that they can see that is happening. I mean, the Gutho's cutout pass. There's no mystical qualities about it. He throws it. He'll throw it in certain situations. They're awake to it, you know. So where we have to be concerned now, however, is that, as was said in that eye test, the coaches have obviously done their homework on how they can tire us out through the middle, or how they can pick us apart through the middle. And if we've got players that aren't performing as they should, and we've just said it, who's our best player? Ryan Madison. Has he been playing in most of the matches? No, he's missed matches. Next best player performance is probably in terms of consistency is would be Reg. He'd be up there if it wasn't for, but he's not, and he's not going to be there for a little while yet. So that's not solved immediately. And so then that next best player is Cardi, and he's an edge player, and Cardi can miss a tackle here or there. But we're not talking about anyone else at the moment in terms of a strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right at the moment, that's my concern. And I'm a bit in two minds here, 40, because like I said, I don't think we're far off the mark, but I think we can point a finger and work out a couple of reasons why, which is that we're not getting all our key players on the same page on the same day. We're not getting the best value from certain key players. Like, I don't think Mitch had a great game against the Titans before he got injured. I don't think
Dill had been quiet prior to this game.
Dill had been relatively quiet prior to it. Junior's been far too quiet this season.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to do this where we've got other issues where we haven't had consistent outside backs because we've had injury and form issues. So the fact that we're like only just losing games, I think to myself, well, look, when we get our act together, it's going to be, it'll be sweet. But then I'm thinking, how long is it going to take us to get our act together? And I know I'm rambling a bit here, mate, but this is maybe indicative. I said the delayed reaction is not going to be too different to an instant reaction.
Yeah.
I knew I'd be like, my head would be spinning with thoughts about what can we do to fix this. I'm not focused right now. This is why I'd be no good as a coach, because I'm looking at it and I'm seeing too many issues. Maybe I'm just, I'm left with my head scratching after this loss. I just see it as one of those games that we shouldn't have lost.
No.
And then I can find so many areas where we didn't do something well enough. But then I keep coming back to, but man, like the flow of the game, it really looked like we should have been winning it. So, yeah, I guess the other thing is too, how many of their tries, the Titans' tries, came from longish breaks? I mean, you've got the intercept.
Yeah, the Calm Pereira foreign cutout pass that he shanked the head of Guffo, but it bounced up perfectly for him.
Yep. And then the try that was set up by the long break.
Yeah, Brian Kelly scoring down the right edge.
Yeah. So, we got taken apart at like it was almost like those were. I know that the Pereira try where he's chipped over the top. That was a. They worked out the numbers there, but it was almost still like we're in good field position in those moments, and it was, how have we let this happen? Like, especially with the Gutho intercept. Like, I mean, we had control of that game, like genuine control of that game, and then that try there, the Gold Coast last try. I mean, what was the score? Was it a 2-point difference?
2-point difference. Yeah. check. So they scored.
Oh, it might have been a 4-point difference.
Yeah,
Anyway,
because we kicked the. They didn't convert, so we kicked the converted try at the end to go +2 on the point differential there.
Yeah. So, and now you've just mentioned the differential. Look at our differential. What are we, about 30 points?
We are so +32, which is still good for. Will put us in terms of just pure points differential. We're 5th in the league, and there's a huge fall off after us. It goes like to single digit positive for the Dolphins and Storm, and then everyone else is in the negative, and it's getting bigger and bigger. So, we mentioned this in the podcast we've done the last couple of weeks that because of our narrow margins of defeat, 3 times by 4, twice by 8, and once by 2 now. We've minimised the impact on the points differential, which is huge for later in the season. But we're also, obviously could have been way up the ladder on pure wins by converting just 1 or 2 of those into wins. And yeah, it's very, very frustrating. But yeah, it's a very weird season too because again, the best points differential right now is +96 for Brisbane, and we're not that far behind with our +32.
Yeah. So again, there's so many things to look at that are happening. I guess the thing is for the coaching staff, they have to find a way to get the wins happening. And no doubt a lot of the things that we've talked about in terms of being, issues for players, they have to find a way to find the fastest, simplest remedy.
Yeah, honestly, it feels like just the club needs to ratchet up the intensity a couple of notches for maybe a month. And again, I know we're talking about pacing yourself across the course of a marathon season, 27 rounds. The NRL's never been larger and longer. But maybe we just need to slip into a higher gear for a bit, and then we can assess whether we need to get back into cruise control. Because right now it feels like we're in cruise control, but we haven't got the momentum.
Yeah. And look, that's probably a way to describe it. There were times in that match against the Titans where it felt like we were cruising. Now, it might seem a strange observation, but the way we were rolling through the middle in the second half, that could have easily been the game against the Knights.
Yep.
For how simple the meters seemed to be. And what did you say the difference between the teams was in terms of meters gained in the match?
Eels, I believe, were pretty much +400. It was 2,055 to 1,672. So it was +380 essentially for the Eels. Yes. But post-contact was +170. So Parramatta was 531 to 364. So the Eels dominated the ground game. And, and the commentary was saying as much, like all the attacking stats are favouring the Eels except for tackle breaks. And, tackle breaks, it's easy to rack them up and not necessarily do a lot with them. Obviously, the Gold Coast Titans made use of it for their first try to Kieran Foran with David Fafita breaking through a couple of tackles to slip the offload. But, yeah, the Eels dominated a lot of the key stats here, but just had the big moments in the game slip away from them because of the Guffo sinbin and the Guffo intercept.
Yeah. And again, it keeps coming back to this. There were moments in the game in all these matches where it goes wrong for us, and probably a lot of it by our own doing, but it goes wrong, and then it ends up being very costly.
Yep.
And it might be a simple error. It might be just not winning a moment where the opposition find a way to stop something, to get there themselves, whatever the case may be. But we're losing as I said before, we're losing the game of inches. We're losing the moments in games where we're winning at a macro level and losing at a micro level.
Yep.
So, I guess maybe that's what I've been trying to say all through this podcast, that there are games where we're winning at a macro level and losing at a micro level.
We've been preaching the attention to detail needed too, so it makes sense.
That's right. I mean, when you spoke about this when the match was on, and we were and when we're at Paraleagues, that attention to detail. It's it couldn't be truer. So now, just I guess the other thing that we should mention right now is that the Eels had a 2-point win in the New South Wales Cup. And because we want to talk about whether there's any pressure coming from underneath in terms of team selections, and I guess the feedback that we've had from the match. I mean, we've seen the highlights, but we've also had feedback from people at the game. Is that the forwards did quite a good job with this. Jake Arthur had quite a strong game, but we were being torn apart on
eviscerated
the
down
right,
the right edge,
right edge.
It looked like Ogden backed up a good game against Newcastle in NRL for a strong game in the New South Wales Cup, which is exactly what we want to see when someone gets dropped back due to, not due to form, but due to, just a bevy of first graders been available in the case of Ryan Madison and whatnot. So Ogden did well there. But yeah, I know a lot of people have called for certain players to be enlisted in the NRL, but the game's played on two sides of the ball, isn't it? So you got to be able to defend as much as you attack, and Parramatta's right edge is just a sieve right now in the in New South Wales Cup. So
so we might see it. There are forwards who are putting their hand up, and you mentioned Ogden that and he performed when he was up in first grade the other week, and we had the lights. Matt Dury had a strong game. Luca Moretti. So we're getting good feedback about their performances in the game. Manny Luke, who's been a bit of a dummy half revelation since he's come into the team via Wenty's Ron Massey Cup team, seems to have added something at dummy half, but we're not necessarily getting too many answers from the New South Wales Cup at this stage. I mean, they're really just, I guess they're trying to find a consistency of their own form.
Well, they're going to do it tough next week too, because Mitchell Moses, Cat 1 stand down concussion. Jake Arthur comes into the NRL team, presumably. They're now without a halfback, so going to be a bit of a shuffle there. Maybe RC into the halves, or I suppose there could be some stuff with Flegg and SG ball talent too they could look at. But next couple of weeks are going to be very big, because the SG ball players, they're going to start getting integrated into the Jersey Flegg. What that means for Jersey Flegg players going up to the Cup, we have to wait and see. But yeah, there's some moving and shaking to be done moving forward, 60s, for all that young talent getting injected into the pathways.
Yeah, that is going to be an interesting selection at New South Wales Cup level, because the Flegg have manufactured halves. They're I mean, what we're expecting is that Ethan Sanders might be a fairly quick selection at Jersey Flegg level, and it's not pointing a criticism at the Jersey Flegg halves. It's basically saying that I think they've been doing a good job for being players that the halves wouldn't necessarily be their best position. It'll be interesting, because I don't know whether they would necessarily elevate someone into the halves from Jersey Flegg. What decision they make around that, honestly, I don't know. Yeah, it probably is a matter of Dejan RC playing. It'll probably be like Rankin playing halfback and RC playing 5'8".
Yeah. And then Lumi back to fullback or something like that.
So it'll probably
Sean Russell could play fullback too, I suppose.
Sean could play fullback. I mean, they'll probably bring Samuel in, I would imagine, from Flegg. He could be playing in the centres. As you say, move Sean back to fullback. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how they line up. It'll be so Team List Tuesday this afternoon will
be very interesting. Yeah, on multiple fronts. See which SG ball players might be featuring in the Jersey Flegg, which Jersey Flegg players could be in the New South Wales Cup, and how the New South Wales Cup managed to figure out playing around without Jake Arthur. So a lot to see there. And before we do sign off, 60s, I got to get you a little bit fired up, because we haven't got through this part.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
what got you fired up out of that Gold Coast game that was outside of Parramatta's control?
Oh, I think the repeat offender, Jaden Campbell, that tackle on Sevo leading with the knees in the corner. If I just can't believe it's past muster. Like, I really don't. I mean, at what point does he become accountable for leading with the knees when he's trying to prevent a try? How is leading with the knees found to be acceptable because of the circumstance that there's a try that's about to be scored? The hip drop tackle is a dangerous tackle that the league is rightly trying to get out. But when you've got knees coming in first, when a player's on the ground, I'm just dumbfounded. I'll be adding something into a bumpers up this week about that particular tackle. Let me be blunt about this. I've had the head scratching moments trying to work out how we lost the game, and at no point through any of this discussion have we pointed the finger at officials or anything like that, right? We've taken that off the table. However, we can't ignore the fact that I think there was justification for that to be an 8-point try. Now, what happens with the potential for an 8-point try there? What does 2 points extra mean? Do I need to say anything more?
Well, and also the fact that you'll be looking at a sin bin too, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I put this to people as well. Let me pick someone from another team, so I'm not making it like it's a Parramatta blame game here. What do you think the result would be if someone like Jared Warrior-Hargraves tried to prevent a try like with that sort of technique? I mean, look, let's get the obvious out of the way. He's a bigger bloke than Jaden Campbell, so he'd probably do some damage every time he came in with that. Last time Jaden Campbell did that on a Parramatta player, it was on Sean Russell, and we know what the result of that was. But what do you think would have happened if it was Jared Warrior-Hargraves making a tackle like that?
Be binned instantly or even sent off.
Yeah, there would be an 8-point try and he'd be binned or sent off. Right? So we've got someone who's not doing it for the first time. And he's probably not alone in that technique in the NRL. And this is where my concern comes in. I'm not necessarily saying, why is this one bloke allowed to get away with it? Because last year I brought up multiple instances of this sort of tackle from other games. I think there was a Tigers player that inflicted it on a Newcastle player. It might have been Dom Young that was the victim of a tackle like that. There was a streak of about 3 or 4 weeks where there was people were using this technique. But I want to come back and point the finger and say, why is it that it would be probably more likely that certain players like a Jared Warrior-Hargraves who have reputations, why can we be certain in our minds that he would feel the wrath of a tackle like that, and yet it might pass muster for someone else? Is it that instance of the scoring the try and it's a lighter weight player that's trying to stop the try, as opposed to a brute of a middle forward? What is it? The thing is, I'm asking these questions because I don't have an answer. I don't know why that just wasn't pulled up. It was blatant when it happened. The footage is damning. The still frames even more so. So, mate, that's got me fired up because, it wasn't enough that Sean Russell was put in hospital last year. We come up against the team again and the same thing happens again. It's just that the consequence wasn't as bad. But Sevo did look a bit dusty, didn't he, after he was tackled?
Yeah.
So, I mean, did Sevo need to writhe around the ground in agony for something like that to be looked at?
Well, it didn't make a difference for Sean Russell last year, whether
No.
he was, literally couldn't get up of his own power because his chest had been caved in. So, yeah, it just seems it's one of those ones where until it happens to a marquee or star player for a club that they really care about, then they're not going to do anything for it. So,
And you know what? The thing is, and you just said it then, his chest was caved in. I mean, that's a horrible way, like that's a word picture. That his chest was caved in, but it's the fact.
Yep.
Like he had the punctured lung. Like I mean, like it was a brutal outcome. And then like let's just think back to the outpouring when Dylan made his tackle that was of a
on Drew Hutchison, wasn't
it? Yeah, where it was Drew Hutchison. Like, and the thing is, we weren't saying that there shouldn't have been a consequence for Dylan Brown. We were like, you know what? How can you argue against that? Look at the outcome. Okay, yeah, sure, he's not the sort of player that would have intended to hurt someone, and like we've never seen a similar instance from Dylan before or after as evidence of that.
Well, that's the thing. He got, obviously there was controversy about him not getting sin-binned in the game, and that's fair for Roosters fans to be upset about that. Dylan wore a 2 or 3 week suspension after that, didn't he?
Correct.
And he's never had any sort of tackle like that because there were consequences. Whereas with Jaden Campbell, he's not worn any consequences, and thus he keeps making the same tackle attempts.
Well, it's rubber stamped. If there are no consequences, that it's been rubber stamped. So, yeah, I mean, I'm filthy on that, and I'm not trying to throw Jaden Campbell on, under the bus because, do you know what? When the Titans were looking to, when there were talks about, maybe they'd part company with Jaden Campbell, I would have had no problems with Jaden Campbell coming to the club.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got an X factor.
We saw that on those kick returns last night. That's how long it's been on Sunday night, where he was always just beating the first man.
Yeah. So, he's got the pedigree as a footballer. He's a major talent in himself. When the Titans don't select him in first grade or have him coming off the bench, it's a bit head scratching because of the fact that he's such a talent. But we have to go on what we're seeing, which is he's used this technique on Parramatta players. I don't know how often he's used it on players from other teams. I'm not watching his methods against other teams, but we can only go on what's happened with Parramatta players. And twice he's in the last 2 years, he's now used this technique on Eels players diving in over the line.
Yep. Well, like I said, until it happens to an important player from an important club, don't expect too much to change. And on that somber note, mate, maybe we'll start wrapping it up. It's been a nice big delayed reaction podcast. This will be out on Tuesday, Team was Tuesday, the 9th of May. And we're going to be right back into it with the NRL News podcast, Clint, which will record later tonight, but they come out on Wednesday. So lots happening here. And then hopefully it all culminates of people turning out on Saturday night at Paraleagues Club, Jack's Bar and Grill. Catch us live for the pre- and post-game shows as the Eels look to hit the road and take on the Canberra Raiders. Sans Mitchell Moses. Going to be a huge game.
Absolutely. Important game. So we have to say, go you Eels.
Yes, sir. Catch you guys next episode.